As Andrew said, I have just returned from the Sea of Cortez just over a week ago, and I'm very pleased to be able to share some of the experiences that I had with you today. As you can see from the title, I will be talking about Vaquita, and the expedition I was on really was probably the last chance for survival for this species. So the Vaquita's range is approximately 4,000 square kilometers. It's located entirely within the Sea of Cortez, Mexico. And the Vaquita is now the most endangered marine mammal in the world. Their entire range encompasses about 1/1000th of the entire surface area of the Earth's oceans. This species was discovered in the 1950s in the Sea of Cortez, Mexico, and by 1994 it was declared endangered. 2 years later, critically endangered. Since then, the population trajectory has been downward. In fact, it's reached about 18.5% per year, and I was just reading that since 2011, approximately 90% of the remaining population has disappeared. The Vaquita is one of 7 species of porpoise that we have on planet Earth, and like all porpoises, they are small, they are difficult to find, they have a very, very low profile to the surface of the water. And if you have any hope of sighting them, you have to wait for those rare occasions between sea states Beaufort 0 and 1. By Beaufort 2, they are simply camouflaged. The current population of Vaquita is less than 30 animals, and I can tell you from my first-hand experience, if we have 30, we are lucky. So why? What's happened? Well, we know why the Vaquita is going extinct. It's because of entanglement in fishing gear, and specifically gill nets. The gill nets are set. They're set for fish. They're not set for Vaquita, but they catch Vaquita. The mortality is entirely fisheries related, and it's been ongoing for decades in both legal and illegal fisheries. The current problem stems entirely from illegal fisheries for the totoaba fish. We don't know the current rates of bycatch, but I can tell you that a few decades ago, we were looking at about 58 animals per year. Right now, the swim bladder is what is targeted in the totoaba, and it's going for around $8,500 US per kilo. So per fish, we're looking at $10,000 to $20,000. This is all black market trade, and the destination is China. This is Omar Vidal. He worked with the World Wildlife Fund. He's holding a totoaba, and you can see beneath a Vaquita and the nets that killed both of them. If we lose the Sea of Cortez population, there is no other, and the species will be lost. The nets function as walls of mortality, and the deaths are indiscriminate. It takes young animals, old animals, males, females, sometimes families. However, Mexico has not sat by idly. In 1993, they created the Upper Biosphere Reserve in the Upper Gulf of California. They created a Vaquita refuge, which is essentially free of entangling nets and shrimp trawlers, but I can tell you just about 10 days ago, we saw shrimp trawlers right to the edge. Totoaba swim bladders have been intercepted, and in fact, even Canadians, I am very disappointed to tell you, have been involved in the black market trade between Mexico and China of totoaba swim bladders. So what is it about the swim bladder? Why is there such a desire? Well, the swim bladders are dried. They're sent to China, they're used in a soup, and it's said to give you a healthy complexion. Personally, I think a good night's sleep and a bit of hydration could be far less harmful. In 2015, there was a gill net ban that was implemented. 2017, there was a memorandum of understanding for a permanent ban on gill nets in the Vaquita habitat, and I am very pleased to tell you that this is in place. There has been a ban on night fishing, and the goal is to make safe sanctuary. There have been international research efforts. There has been international scientific cooperation, visual and acoustic monitoring in the Sea of Cortez, using big eyes that allow us to see up to 6 miles at sea. And it's amazing, you can see a porpoise from 6 miles away. It is quite an honor and a privilege to have that opportunity. And the Vaquita have been seen, and they have been heard. In fact, I've seen them this month. However, in spite of all of those efforts, the Vaquita said by the International Committee for the Recovery of Vaquita, which is an international task force that the vaquita is in imminent danger of extinction, and that CERVA, which is this task force, strongly recommends to the government of Mexico to enact emergency regulations, and that the gill net ban, the exclusion zone, encompass not just the refuge, but the entire range of vaquita. And the refuge which was put in place covers approximately 80% of the known range of vaquita. You can see on this figure here, this is the upper Gulf of California, or Sea of Cortez. The area shaded in green is the biosphere reserve that's been in place since the early 1990s. The purple is the vaquita refuge, and the blue area is where the ban is to take place. In addition to these emergency actions, it was recommended that in order to stave off extinction for vaquita, we must also implement an ex situ situation for rescue. And this involved a new effort, an effort that had never been done before, called Vaquita Conservation, Protection, and Recovery, also known as Vaquita CPR. Vaquita CPR took place in October and November of this year. It was conducted with numerous vessels at sea. The Maria Cleophas, the large vessel here, was our main vessel that stayed out at sea, and then we had a number of smaller vessels as well that acted as support vessels. Our first mission, and I was sitting on the plane on the way down thinking, I do hope there still are vaquita for us to try and find. Our very first mission was to find, are there still vaquita living in the Sea of Cortez? And we searched with both the big eyes, we searched on smaller vessels. I was on one of the small vessels, and we did find them. We found living vaquita within a few days of the beginning of our efforts. We also worked in conjunction with the observers on the Maria Cleophas that had the big eyes. We worked together to find vaquita, to track vaquita. And remember, the range is approximately 4,000 square kilometers, and we're looking for a population of less than 30. You cannot implement standard scientific protocols to do a standardized survey design and hope that in a month period or 5 weeks you were going to actually find these animals. So there was another team that was involved in Vaquita CPR, and we are eternally grateful to the acousticians and the fishermen who were working day and night to retrieve acoustic data from the sea pods that were deployed within the Sea of Cortez. And the fishermen that were involved had been hired by the project. So instead of fishing, they're actually conducting scientific research. And the acousticians would process the data all night. We departed at 4:30 in the morning, and by that time, we knew where the animals had last been heard within the last 24 hours. So we used a very targeted approach. And sometimes we didn't find any vaquita, and sometimes we found a big group, maybe 3 animals. There was a nice group of 2, and you can see the sea state, Beaufort 0, which we waited and maximized. The minute that sun came up, we were searching. And we were very lucky. We, in fact, had a vaquita come very close to our vessel. We saw calves, we saw pairs, we saw single animals, and we did see a couple groups of 3. The second aspect of Vaquita CPR was, can we actually live capture a vaquita? Nobody's ever done that before. And it turns out, in fact, we can. We had a coordinated effort. We had a group of Danish scientists who were very well accustomed to catching harbour porpoise for research purposes. And we worked with the Danes in order to try and catch vaquita. The next aspect of the Vaquita CPR for the transport of vaquita, because Mexico built a safe sanctuary. We know why vaquita were dying. It was because of entanglement in gill nets. We know that if the gill nets are not there, the animals are very likely to survive. We also know that with decades worth of effort, we still have illegal fishing going on. And so the last chance for survival for vaquita was to move them from their natural habitat into a safe sanctuary that is in the Sea of Cortez. It is a net-free area. But this required transport and, of course, the adaptation of vaquita into the care of humans. The animal I just showed you was the first animal caught. That animal did not do well in terms of its adaptation to being in care. It was released back into the wild. This is the land-based facility. It's a state-of-the-art center for vaquita health. And this is part of the sea sanctuary where the animals should have, hopefully, been thriving. But unfortunately, the second animal that was caught did not do well. The capture went well, the transport went well, but the adaptation to human care did not go well. And so she was also released, and very sadly, she died. And it was interesting to me that we've had decades and decades of work and scientists raising the alarm bells for a species that is sliding towards the cliff of extinction. And the world largely didn't notice. I suspect it was sort of in the background of a scientist saying, you know, conservation, species decline, extinction, blah, 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 and it drones on. One animal died, and we know it made the world wake up because the headlines went around the world. So now we have to miss this middle step of keeping them in a net-free area that's a safe sanctuary. We have to make the Sea of Cortez a safe sanctuary, and this is no small feat. In our off time, we would walk the beaches and we found nets. We cleaned up nets. We have worked from British Columbia to try and increase the awareness. The Porpoise Conservation Society developed a Vaquita classroom module for teachers. It's free, it's around the world. If you are a teacher and you would like it, just contact us, it's available. And in the program, we really emphasize the fact that this is about how many Vaquita are left. That's it. A few more, and they will be extinct, and that will be the end of this story. Unfortunately, for Vaquita, but for other porpoises, this is not the end of the story. The Yangtze finless porpoise is also listed as critically endangered. The Burmeister's porpoise, we know that there are very high levels of directed and incidental mortality, yet they are classed as data deficient. How many are there? We don't know, but what we do know is that those that are being caught and those that are being sold are declining in numbers as well. Does this mean that the animals have changed their distribution, or does it mean that there are simply fewer of them out there in the ocean to catch? We do not know. Even the harbour porpoise, which is most often thought of as a common species, well, the Baltic Sea subpopulation is currently listed as critically endangered. Why? Entanglement in fishing nets. These animals are suffering. The gill nets are walls of mortality, and there are animals, probably as we speak, that are silently drowning. So one of the things that I would like to stress is the incredible amount of work that Mexico has done. And President Nieto has stood forth and said that he is committed to the conservation of Vaquita. So has the Minister of the Environment, Paquiano. And both of these men deserve to hear the accolades that they deserve for standing on the front lines of conservation in the face of incredibly difficult odds, because the black market trade is a very difficult one to enforce, particularly when we're talking about an area that's 4,000 square kilometers of ocean. And I would just like to finish up by saying that we know that education is definitely helping, because this was recently sent to the Porpoise Conservation Society by a group of students in Australia. And this is a very dark and somewhat dismal topic, but I would like to end slightly happier with what school children think of Vaquita. And these images just came in about 10 days ago, I believe. And so if we can reach children in Australia to care about Vaquita, surely we can reach people in Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and support Mexico in their continued efforts, and support the people who are still on the ground in the Sea of Cortez. And that includes the folks from the Whale Museum out of La Paz, who every single day go out in their vessels and pull nets out of the Sea of Cortez. And there are other efforts there as well. And I strongly encourage all of you, if you care about conservation, if you care about porpoises, to take 10 minutes of your life and let people know how much you care about small cetaceans and entanglement in gill nets, because they're out there. I took these pictures less than a month ago. However, the sun has not yet set on Vaquita entirely, because they are still there. And there are some very, very dedicated people around the world who are going to continue to fight for the survival of those last few remaining individuals. And all hope is not yet lost, because there are a number of marine mammal populations that we have on this planet today that have come back from the brink of extinction. I was just reading about the Western North Pacific gray whale, which I believe was considered largely extinct until about the 1990s. And the population is now on a positive trajectory, small, but positive. And let's hope that with a bit more effort and a bit more international support, that the population trajectory for the Vaquita in Mexico shall turn around, and instead of being decreasing, perhaps one day soon, we will start to see an increasing, if we can only make the Sea of Cortez a safe sanctuary and gill net free for Vaquita. In closing, I have to say that this is a huge undertaking. Vaquita CPR had 65 scientists from 9 countries around the world, and I felt very privileged to be one of 3 Canadians who was involved. But there are many, many people who made this possible and who are still making the vaquita habitat increasingly safer as each day goes by. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention and take any questions. Yes, thank you. The question was that Mexico has clearly stepped up to the plate in terms of vaquita conservation, but have there been efforts in China? And that's an excellent question, because that is the destination and that is the driving force behind the illegal fishery for the Totoaba swim bladders. I know that there has been some efforts to try and raise awareness about the Totoaba swim bladders and the ecological effects of the illegal fishery. However, this is battling a very diffuse and difficult market to crack. There is an investigation that has been underway through the Environmental Investigation Agency that is targeting the other sides of this equation, which would be the poachers and then the destinations. And I think this information is going to be coming forth very soon.
Oh, yes. Creative question here. Since recently, probably most of you are aware of the movies called the Justice League, where the most superhero called Aquaman, he is the domain of the sea. So have you ever thought of the new movie released in 2018, contact the studio, have Aquaman to the spokesperson worldwide for this species?
The question is related to contacting people who are going to get this information out there. And that actually, yes, it has been considered. That's beyond my involvement in the project. But I do know that there was a film crew, Terra Mater, that was with us throughout the expedition. And I don't know much about them, but I did see their documentary, The Ivory Trade, which is apparently on Netflix. And I believe it's along those same lines, where it's investigative journalism that exposes the unpleasantness behind the black market trade with particular species. But all I can say is all ideas and all voices are welcome. There are more people in this room than there are vaquita on the planet. So if we all work together, we are going to achieve our goal. Yeah.
Where we go?
Okay.
Oh. Do you have an idea of how much money was spent on this effort to save them, and how much it would actually cost the Mexican government to patrol effectively in the area for gillnets?
That's a great question, Kathy. The question is related to the cost of vaquita CPR versus the cost of patrolling. And in fact, I should have mentioned that we were accompanied by the Mexican Navy throughout this expedition, and we are very grateful for them keeping us safe, but also the work that they're doing every single day to try and keep vaquita safe. In terms of the overall cost, I am not entirely sure, but it is in the millions of dollars, or the equivalent of millions of dollars. Although this effort took place in October and November, I mean, the conservation efforts are going back, as I said, decades, even down to there have been fisheries buyout programs, there's been alternative gear switching, there's alternative employment for fishermen. So this is the largest conservation effort ever in the history of Mexico. In terms of the total dollar figure, I have no idea. But I would say that my personal opinion is that those last 20 to 30 vaquita are definitely worth it.
That I'm not surprised.
Yes. Oh, hi.
My question is just in relation to local fishermen and the local Mexicans, and what efforts have been for getting their participation, and what have they achieved throughout all of this?
Oh, okay, thank you. The question is related to the local fishermen in Mexico and what have they achieved. There have been significant achievements locally. There are still some very significant challenges to tackle as well. as I was just mentioning, there have been buyout programs for fishermen. There's been alternative gear. And in this project in particular, a number of fishermen have been employed, both with the acoustic detections, but also the net removal program. And those projects are still ongoing. Just because the visual team that I was on has left, the effort and the momentum for Vaquita is still, it's really strong. One of the biggest challenges is that there are some people who really don't want Vaquita to survive, because then the problem goes away and you can continue to illegally harvest and go under the radar, so to speak. And so we have been battling some misinformation that has been put forth. And one of those, when I was there, was that somebody had put out that the scientists weren't actually documenting real live Vaquita. They had plastic ones or robot ones, and they were photographing those. And unfortunately, that type of very negative, destructive information can go very quickly throughout small communities and build some distrust. So the fact that we do have fishermen involved, and one of the men that I worked with, he actually said to some fishermen that were saying, you people don't know what you're talking about. There's no such thing as a Vaquita. And he said, listen, I have fished here my entire life. I had never seen a Vaquita until today. And I can tell you what I saw was not plastic and it was not a robot. It was real. And so now with the strength, it's sort of confidence and strength in numbers. The more people that see them, and as part of Vaquita CPR, one of the byproducts was the number of fishermen locally that actually saw for the first time in their lives a living Vaquita. And they recognized, wow, what a beautiful animal. And so now they will be able to spread that information. One of the projects that I am working on and moving forward with the Porpoise Conservation Society is a partnership with one of the fishing cooperatives, where we can take advantage of the fact that these men are on the water every day. And they are working in areas outside of the refuge as well, and see if we can't get additional information. And in fact, at the Porpoise Conservation Society, those of you who were here last year, I told you about our sightings platform, which is global. We were very pleased to have a report of living Vaquita sent into our sightings platform from the Sea of Cortez that went into the CERVA report, the International Task Force for Vaquita, because there are so few sightings of live animals. And so I think the fishermen and the education is ongoing. And the momentum is growing. It's starting to spread throughout the local communities.
Okay, I have 2 online questions, if you can get to those. I've been trying to get to the past 10 minutes. There's one question from Beatrice.
So we'll take these 2 last questions that are online, and then we have to take a break. We're going to take those questions.
Good.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Beatrice wants to know whether there's any involvement by Chinese researchers.
Oh, that's one of the online questions was whether or not there was any involvement from Chinese researchers, and that is a fantastic question. And not that I'm aware of, but that's certainly something that I think I will send back to the folks at Vaquita CPR, and perhaps with any positive results, we could probably post that on porpoise.org.
Okay, and then there's another question. It's just what kind of people are involved in that illegal Totoaba fishery? Is there any kind of intelligence that Vaquita CPR had about that?
The question is what kind of people are involved in the illegal fishery? And that is another good question, and I probably am not qualified to answer it because I, as far as I know, have never met any of them. However, what I would say is we know what the driving force is, and it's money. And so the problem that is taking place in the Sea of Cortez with regard to Totoaba and Vaquita is the same problem that is found around the world, from British Columbia with black bears to the trade of ivory coming out of Africa. It's driven by money, and it's probably to do with a sector of our society that has very little regard for the inherent value of wild animals and wild spaces.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.